life, she never had any moments of mortal fear. Her concussion was simply too severe to allow for any thoughts other than, advance, keep going, no matter what might lurk under the fetid surface of this water.
Juliane, als ich mich vor einiger Zeit hier mit Guano 5 Macheteros
Juliane, when I hacked my way through here some time ago with 5 macheteros, I discovered this. According to what you had told me, it was obvious that this must have been the propeller blade and engine you came across back then. However, you must have come from this direction, because the water flows this way.
Yes, that must have been the engine, which I found on the third day. Following the course of water, it was on the right-hand side. It was smeared all over with black oil and crushed like this.
Are you aware that after the crash in Cusco, the previous crash, it was discovered that the mechanics who maintained these engines had, up till then, only repaired motorcycles? And apparently the pilots hadn't any appropriate licenses. And the worst was that in Cusco 101 bodies were retrieved from the wreckage. There was one single survivor, the co-pilot, who had suffered severe burns. But the capacity of the plane was 92, which means that they jammed an additional 10 passengers on board.
Their reputation was really the worst imaginable.
Well, I only flew this line because it was the cheapest. I had to save money.
You were lucky that nothing happened to you. Their reputation couldn't have been worse.
Yes, I knew that. Juliane has her safeguards against the horror. She has frequent dreams about shelves, cases and racks, where millions of butterflies are stored away, all existing species of this world. It is, she says, as if I could safely lock away all the airplanes in the world so that they could not hurt me anymore. But then the dream turns into a nightmare. Suddenly there are no more living beings, no animals, only trophies. They are stored away in large halls, whole warehouses are filled with them, and the trophies are for sale. And then animal skins of every species, with only a few remaining frozen in poses from a distant past. They will never move again, they will never stir. They are caught in the abyss of time.
Dies ist einer meiner Retter sozusagen.
This is one of my saviors, so to speak. They are crested chickens, very primordial birds, with a peculiar and awkward behavior. They live in groups by larger rivers. They produce a snorting sound highly atypical of birds. When you approach them, they get extremely agitated. They keep flapping their wings and seem to bow to each other. It looks quite hysterical. The young ones live in slovenly built nests in branches overhanging the rivers. Quite often they fall into the water, but they have claws on their wings, like the primordial bird, the Archaeopteryx, and with great agility they climb back up through the branches into the nests. They are also good swimmers. They are pretty indestructible.
Das ist also einer meiner Retter.
This is one of my saviors. There are some crested chickens. You recognize them by their beautiful crests. It is a relatively large bird, which has a peculiar... Oh, that was just a woodpecker. For a moment I thought I had heard one. It's a large bird which has an atypical, but in the jungle, very distinctive call. Some sort of a wheezing snort or snarl. I don't remember it precisely. Somewhat like this. Something like that. I can't really imitate it well. But 3 days after the crash, I suddenly heard these calls, and I thought, this is my salvation, because wherever those birds are, there must be a larger body of water. I immediately changed direction and headed straight for those calls, because I hoped I might find people. The mud is quite deep here. Exactly at this point I reached Rio Chebonia. You can recognize this spot by the amount of giant cane. There is no other place along this river where the Caña Brava grows so densely.
And Juliane immediately recognized that this river was not navigable, that she would not encounter people here.
Initially on Rio Chebonia, I saw and heard planes circling above me. After a few days, this ceased altogether, and I realized that the search had been called off. I was aware that I was now all on my own and that I could no longer expect any outside help. This is why my feeling of solitude and abandonment grew deeper.
All Juliane had was a single sandal and no tools of any kind. If she had only had a machete and a lighter, her survival would have been much easier. She could have built a simple shelter. She could have taken out the soft core, the heart of a certain type of palm, and eaten it.
Se puede comer. Sí, se puede comer. Se come.
She could have cut through a certain type of liana and found pure fresh water. She could have cooked the easily found chihuahuacu nut. You can also roast them in hot ashes. These nuts have a very high nutritional value.
I felt no hunger at all. During the entire time I ate nothing. I felt no need to. However, I did drink a lot of water. The only thing that really alarmed me was this wound that I had on my arm. The flesh flies had laid their eggs there. Maggots had hatched, and they had eaten themselves deep into my flesh. They had bored a deep hole. When I turned my arm like this, I could look inside. They were half an inch long. The hole was this large, and I saw these maggots wiggling around. That's when I got frightened. I thought I might develop blood poisoning and eventually lose my arm. That really worried me.
Puede sacar la soga.